Hello everyone, welcome to another session of the Film Voyage, and we have none other than Mr. Vinil Mathew, who is an ad filmmaking genius and a great filmmaker himself. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you, Aryan. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to this session.
Well, I was looking for the stuff that you've made, and I was watching it on YouTube. A very ironical thing happened. One of the ads that I was trying to watch, the ad that played before it on YouTube was also made by you. Now that's something that really that really doesn't happen that much. But I really want to ask you, like Wikipedia से जितना मैंने छापा है, जितना आपके बारे में पढ़ा है, is that your journey with cinema started with being fascinated by Mani sir's film Roja, if I'm not wrong, and then you went on to study in Delhi University. Then FTI happened, and then you went to Munich, and uh, that's a very condensed version of your journey with cinema. Now, what fascinated you about cinema so early on in your life? What was it?
So, to be honest, Aryan, I think I always, since I was a child, I used to enjoy watching stuff on TV, And when we were growing in the late 80s and 90s, we had very few options. And there was Doordarshan, which would start at some 5:30 in the evening and probably end 2 hours or 3 hours later. And you had Krishi Darshan, which was the main program it started with. And I think we were all starved of some sort of entertainment that, we would watch that also with a lot of attention. So it was very unlike today where you have so much noise and so many things happening around you. But those days we were very deprived of any kind of film or so. I would just watch the whole audio visual medium itself was just fascinating. And whenever a film would come on TV or whenever an ad would come, I would really enjoy and subconsciously kind of in my head remember the jingle or the visuals or there was something which kind of hooked me, but I never took it seriously because I came from a family which had nothing to do with anything creative at all. Forget film, but media, nothing. I mean, we were purely like a regular family where watching TV itself was a bad habit. And to the extent that when I went to FTI, my mother said, don't waste your time watching films, go and study hard. So that was the kind of background I came from. But and I was, to be honest, studying to be an economist. I was very interested in the world of finance and economics, and pretty much set on that path. It was in my 10th after my board exams. I think Roja released, and I went to see it with a friend in Delhi, where I grew up, in a theater, and I was just blown by the experience of it. I had not seen in something in mainstream cinema which had that kind of sensibility, whether it was the way it was shot, whether the music by A.R. Rahman and even the performances. There was a real life story told with a lot of dramatic mainstream elements, but yet at the same time those seemed natural. It didn't seem outlandish, or how we were used to the films in 80s and 90s. It just has kind of balanced aesthetics and drama and all the elements really well, and I was just really like wowed by it, and it stuck there in my head. And then a week later, there used to be this theater in Delhi called Shakuntalam, where people could watch films. We paid them $10 at that time, and they would just do some screenings of whatever famous films or good films, and it was in Pragati Maidan, and I would go there often, because it was quite cheap to go there and watch it, and then they had good screenings of good films. So I think about 10 days later, I saw a film called Parinda by Vidhu Chopra, and that was another kind of film, but that also kind of was really. I mean, I was just the form of it, the way it was shot, the drama again, the whole feeling was something else. And these two films were not really similar to the kind of stuff I'd seen earlier, and it suddenly kind of got me very excited, and I kept thinking about the films. And initially, I think I was drawn more to the visual language and the way it was shot. So my initial plan, or what I was thinking, is that maybe it's better I become a DOP. I mean, director was never a part of the thinking. It was just way too far from where I was to even think of directing, because you're academically oriented, you're studying for a career in economics. And this I thought could be a hobby where I could, and that kind of inspired me to do still photography. So I said, okay, kind of there were no phones those days, so you had to invest in a camera. But I started looking at pictures, and it's the visual design which kind of attracted me. And then, I was watching commercials, and I said, I like the way this looks, I like the way this is shot. So it was there subconsciously as a hobby, not as a career choice. And then I read an interview by Mani Ratnam in India Today, and he mentioned something very interesting. He was an MBA from Jamnalal, and he said, it's time that educated people came into filmmaking and turned or create another form of narrative where it's more realistic, it's more natural, and you play with form. And and that was a very inspiring interview. I read that and I was like, wow, this is something which I feel I can identify with. I feel I can go and do something different. And you're very idealistic and very stupid at that age. So I started researching, reading up, and more on filmmakers. And I think when my first year of college, when you get those summer holidays, I somehow managed to, and I was a big fan of Santosh Sivan actually, and I loved the way he was shooting his film. And cinematography had changed at that time with a lot of these new age cameramen, Santosh Sivan, PC Sriram, KV Anand, Ravi K. Chandran later. So all these guys that come, and they were changing the way films were shot. I like the drama, the visual artistry, all those things. So I was kind of tending towards becoming or my interest was in cinematography rather than direction. And I was somehow crazy. I wanted to just work with Santosh Sivan and assist him, and somehow kind of figure out what could happen. And via a lot of calls here and there, and then I found this opportunity to come to Bombay and assist this filmmaker called Bharat Bala, who happened to use Santosh Sivan as his DOP in a lot of his projects. So I said, okay, maybe via that I can kind of get to know him and stuff. But so I came to Bombay. I stayed in a hostel, and for 2 months I assisted in advertising films. And my parents were like, okay, he'll go, he'll kind of struggle and he'll come back, and it was a struggle. It wasn't easy. I was kind of trying my best to survive for those 2 months. But the fun I had, the joy of being there on a set for the first time, seeing a film camera, seeing an edit happen or music happen, all those things one had seen as a kid on TV, and I was seeing it happen in front of my eyes, and I was just, I just immersed myself into it, and I've just completely enjoyed it so much. I knew it in my heart that this is what I want to do. Like, I might not become a director, I might not become a DOP, but I'm just enjoying this process so much that I just want to be part of that. And from then on, my mind or heart was kind of split, and that was the direction I was drifting towards. But anyway, I came back to Delhi, and then I was completing my, Delhi University. I was doing my economic honors, and I was continuing. And Bharat Bala would often shoot in Delhi, some ad or something, and he would call me, and he knew that I was interested, and he would ask me whether I could do some production for him, some location management, some kind of casting. And I would do all these things, I would find locations, or I would, go on the streets and cast faces and stuff. And I enjoyed it. It was good pocket money, but it was also a great experience. And by the end of the third year, my heart was on it, but I didn't tell my parents. But I applied to all the mass communication and film schools in India, and hoping that something would happen. And in my heart, I was hoping Jamia Millia, that MCRC would happen, because film school was something too much, and it was too alien for us. And I knew that my parents would not be happy, and even I was scared, because those days you go to film school, you didn't get a job, or you would really struggle, and I was not sure if I could pull that. So I said, if I do something in mass comm, and I could work in advertising, there are far more avenues. So it was a very practical kind of desire, like, okay, I'll get into MCRC or IMC, or worst case XIC Pune, somewhere, kahin to koi ho jayega. And as luck would have it, I didn't get anywhere except FTI, which was not on my list, because I said that's too much of, too extreme to study there. But I got through the entrance, and I went there, and the interview, and the usual process happened, and I cleared the FTI exam. And those days, it wasn't very common for people at that age to clear FTI, because I was straight out of college. And you had people, or a lot of my batchmates were actually like 10, 15 years older to me. Like, people would come at 30s or in the late 20s after they've studied and they've seen life, and they would come. And here I was just straight out of college without seeing much of life, and I was landed up in FTI. And but yeah, then film school changes your perspective about everything. And we grew up in a generation where like I said earlier, there was no access to films. There were no OTT platforms. There was no movie. There was no Netflix. So it was the first time one saw world cinema. You saw different kinds of cinema. You understood that, hey, look, there's so much more to than what one thought there was. And it was like one of the best 3 years of my life. I would just immerse myself into cinema, and yeah, the funny what do you call thing was that when I applied to FTI, I wanted to apply for the camera course, but they said, since you don't have physics and chemistry in your 11th and 12th, you can't. So I said, okay, so what is the next option? So I said, can I try editing? I said, you can do editing, but that requires a lot of patience. So I said, "Wo bhi mere mein nahi hai, to kya karoon?" So direction was my third choice. And in my head, I thought I'll take direction and then I'll go and sit in the camera class. And also I learn editing, and that was my plan. Ironically, we didn't have an editing batch at all because there was a 0 year, there was a strike and there was 0 year. So eventually we ended up editing our own films. So I kind of picked up on editing skills while I was there. And camera, what happened is that the professor got to know that I had an interest in camera, and he made sure that I was not seen anywhere close to his class. And I think he scared all the camera students and warned them that, be careful of this director. He's going to interfere in your, work. So steer clear. So when I had to look for a BOP in my batch as my cameraman for my student films, I really struggled to get somebody. So that was my journey to film school.
Yeah. What exactly when the time that you spent in FTI with trying to learn everything, and it's very overwhelming in the first couple of years, and what did you find that what are you more inclined towards? Like, did you find some sort of a voice that you could identify with?
To be honest, Aryan, I was just for the initial few months, I was just overwhelmed, And like I said, it's very different. 20 years back, we all came from a generation which is far more innocent, and cinematically illiterate to another level, because except for watching Doordarshan and an odd film in the theater, there was absolutely no exposure to cinema or any of those things which we take for granted now. The current generation is, you already know your directors, you know your films, there is a level of knowledge which you always enter the institute with a certain kind of knowledge, which wasn't there for us. So from seeing Amitabh Bachchan films and then seeing Roja and, suddenly coming in the first week seeing Tarkovsky or Buñuel was like, I was just grappling with things around me. It was too much of a shock. So I was somehow trying my best to cope up with it. And then I realized that my batchmates, there were people who, one was an author, one was from theater, somebody was a writer. So I didn't come from a creative background at all. I mean, for me, everything was alien. So I think it was just coping up for me initially, and voice and all was much later, but it was just like, and I had an academic approach to it. I said, I need to get a scholarship. I need to come first in the class. It's like I should get good marks, so the point was more of, how do I get a scholarship and pay my fees? Because my father was refusing to, support me at that time. And I was in that straight from college. So I was more like, how do I clear my exams and how do I know? Of course, I was enjoying and I was gradually opening up, but I started with zero. And what happened is, one of my earlier student projects, we used to always kind of dig into the local Pune theater groups for actors, and that used to be like a hunting ground for our student films. We'd go and request actors. And one of my first year continuity projects, I asked this lady who was a veteran Marathi actress in Pune, and she came for one of my projects. And then I said, I was very raw and naive, and I said, you have to cry in this scene. And then she asked me, so what is my motivation? How am I supposed to cry? Why should I cry? And I was like, these are two very difficult questions, and nobody taught me this. I was sweating. I said, just cry the way you like. He said, no, I can't. So she took my case. She said, have you even thought of characters? Have you thought of what is coming before me? Why am I crying? Should I cry loud, or should I be like not expressing myself? I was like stunned, and it was a humiliating thing because everybody's watching you while that actor is taking your case. And I was literally in tears, and and that was where I started. So I remember then that first year semester holidays, I didn't go back home. I decided that I will study everything there is about acting theoretically. So Stanislavski, so Meyerhold, all the books I read, so that the theoretical bullshit I kind of figured out. So anybody talk to you could also kind of give answers which were convincing. And then I went and attended a lot of rehearsals through my friends. I would go to a lot of theater rehearsals and practice, and I understood the process of how actors work and stuff like that. So to be honest, my first or 2 years in FTI were just kind of grappling with form, technique, basic directorial skills, just being exposed to cinema. That was very far away to get a sense of what my voice is, or how do I want to tell a story. It was just very like, bread and butter kind of approach to filmmaking, to be honest. I think maybe the second year is when I realized that, what is that I'm going to say differently, because I didn't come with any objective. I didn't have a vision in my head, or I didn't have angst in me, or I didn't have anything where I said, okay, this is a cinema I believe in. I didn't even know what I believed in, It was just, I was just fascinated by images and sound and the process of it, but there was nothing I felt that I wanted to say it differently. So there was a pressure, of course, on me to kind of find my voice. But to be honest, I don't think I found my voice till very late in life. Even after passing out of FTI, when I started directing commercials, it's after a long time that some sort of voice, or I knew that my style of filmmaking will be this, kind of organically emerged after a certain life experience. So I think for me at film school, I was way too raw to kind of say, okay, this is where I realized I will do something. But it was all over the place. It was just basically dealing with basic issues of directing.
Yeah, and that onset experience is quite real. I mean, this happened to the most of us, where actors take your case. And so, but like, what were the kind of stories that you were inclined to when you were making these student films of yours? Like, I mean, what would you find yourself being fascinated by, like writing and the ideas and the visuals, especially? There's a certain aesthetic sense that a film school gives you. And what was it that you were like in through, of course, different projects might have been very different from each other because you were grappling with stuff, but what was that, in terms of, in terms of the storytelling, what was it that you were inclined towards?
So I think somewhere in within me, I always felt I want to always make films in a mainstream arena. I knew that I was not cut out for non-fiction. I knew that I was something very independent, or something which is very highly artistic. I mean, for me, it was more of, I thought that because I wanted to make films which I enjoyed, and the films I enjoyed always had a lot of humor, or drama, or a visual language which was very appealing. So I knew that my area of operation is primarily going to be in mainstream cinema, and because in film school there is so much pressure to be intelligent and to kind of perform at a certain level, and not so I would keep myself I'll be very embarrassed about liking mainstream cinema, and even a lot of my ideas had, I wanted to have a punch at the end or some twist, and how usual.
Yeah.
So one would be very embarrassed and conscious and self-conscious, and I would be very scared. And I would admit that in my film school, a lot of my projects are very confused, because I wanted to. My heart was leading to me mainstream cinema, but my brain was saying, let's try and make it a bit more, artistic. So, वो थोड़ा confusion था उसमें. Having said that, I think my song I did during those days called Chalat Musafir. I'd used that song and then I did my version on it. And it did really well in the institute those days, because we didn't have non-linear editing. We were cutting on film, and we were kind of, had to splice a negative. And I had a lot of cuts, and that whole story was an interesting. I mean, it was the first project which I thought was slightly different and kind of interesting, and people noticed that, and for a long time they used to play in Holi in FTI. They used to play my song as one of the songs they would, dance to. So yeah, I tried different things here. I mean, there was no pattern. There was, like I said, it was just beyond understanding all these things. But I gravitated towards mainstream entertaining cinema. And but to having said that, I also enjoyed world cinema. I enjoyed a lot of, like, for me, my favorite filmmaker for the longest time was Ozu, or I really enjoyed Hitchcock. I like the nuance of a Tokyo Story, or all of Ozu's films. A lot of Truffaut I liked. So it wasn't like I'm only going the commercial way. So my problem was that, and I always till date I believe that there should not be any hierarchy in cinema. You should not pre-decide that this is how film should be, or this is. So I feel. And even my friends who are made in FTI, all of us had this ability to kind of judge a film for what the filmmaker was trying to make, rather than us coming with a perspective how a film should be. So in my head, I didn't create any hierarchies that a Tarkovsky is better or a Ray is better. Like I loved Ray, a lot of his films I could identify with it, but it didn't mean that I didn't like Ghatak also, So one really enjoyed the films. I loved them. I learned from them. I would see them again and again. But I knew that I wanted to do something more. And actually, when I was in film school, I didn't even know if I wanted to make a feature film. I was okay going back to advertising, which I never told anybody, because I thought there's so much fun happening there. And advertising during those days was really a great space to be in, because within 3 weeks you finish a project and you work on an action film, and then you go on to a comedy film, then you can go and do something with cars, and then you can do something in food. So you were constantly learning a lot of the craft. You were kind of the learning curve was very high. So I just felt that I need to go and learn this medium. I need to explore more, I need to learn more, I need to experiment more. And I thought advertising would allow me that space, either visually or with music or with performances or styles of filmmaking. So somehow subconsciously I thought, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to go back to advertising. And till that time where I feel from the inside that I need to make a long format or feature film, I will, as long as I'm in this medium of shooting films, whether they're short or long or whatever it is. I mean, I just want to be practicing some sort of, filmmaking, not necessarily a film. So it wasn't very idealistic. It wasn't very lofty. It was just coping up, mostly with the FDI.
Yeah. But when it comes to like advertising, the films, like your ad films, uh, even for the past 5 years, like right now in the ad space, like there's not much inventiveness going on around. And once we look back, the ads that stuck with us were somehow like, I mean, you were the common thread there. That this ad, like the Nescafe ad, or the Coca-Cola ad, where starring Alia Bhatt and Siddharth Malhotra, where they are a newly married couple, or the recent one with Vineet Kumar, where he calls his wife. So it looks to me as if, like, this person's really enjoying himself. The ones who's making an advertisement, it doesn't always need to be that, okay, I'm selling something and it needs to be sold at a certain way. Now, what do you feel that bringing a filmmaker to say something, to have a take on something that's initially designed to be sold? Now, how do you do that? Like, is it something that comes organically to you, or is it something that you have to work your way around?
So both ways, Aryan, because when I started my career in advertising, I used to get a lot of visual films, and even I was keen to do it. So we would constantly be doing things where, those days you take out the lens and you put Vaseline on them and you try some different angle, and, you have those fast cuts and, so all whatever the tricks are there in the bag, I would try and use that. And that was the aim, to visually kind of do very stylized kind of, films. And I did a lot of them. And I kept doing it till the time I finished all the things I wanted to do, my wish list of looks and style and sunrise shot and sunset shots, and hand in the blowing in the whatever car, car ke bahar, you keep a hand out, and all those cliches, everything you've done, put the camera under the table, over the table, you've gummed it, you have tried out your lenses, zoomed, everything. So I exhausted whatever I want to do visually in the first 2-3 years of advertising, because I used to keep getting those look commercials, try and make it look good, try and make it look cool, and try and make it young, the very music video kind of thing. So once I got bored of it, I felt the need to explore more. And I then started having my own, because, after some time you're on a auto mode, because you're just getting work and you keep doing the same thing from your muscle memory. So I had a phase where I would say, okay, I would only shoot with 50 mm lens. I will not use a zoom. I will not use a wider lens. Let's see how I can tell a story. And can I tell a story without actors emoting at all? If I go deadpan, So there are a lot of these things I, as a filmmaker, was tripping on, even when the scripts were very mundane or something which they would not allow me to work on. But one of the things I did when I joined advertising, because when I came at an era where you only had models. You had good-looking Parsi models, South Bombay models who would come again and again in advertising. And one of the few things I said is that, look, I want to make it look real. So really started the casting process in advertising. Those days I remember where people would cast an ad in 3 days, I would spend 3 weeks, fight with the client and spend 3 weeks looking for fresh actors, fresh faces, from theater, from film, from fresh face, so that there was relatability, So I just try to make everything relatable. Then those days, the whole word was aspirational. Advertising had to be aspirational. It has to look good. I said, let's make it more relatable. So I started shooting a lot outside the set and in real locations, So nobody recognizes that, but it was during our time that we pushed that envelope in terms of more realism, more natural kind of. So if you see the earlier Cadbury commercials, or if you see a lot of those films, even for Vodafone and Airtel and all, we tried pushing in realism. We tried moving in, characters and believable things. And I then figured out that I'm actually a filmmaker in advertising. I'm not an advertising filmmaker, but I'm a filmmaker in advertising. So my approach is always, okay, when a client comes with a concept, and if that kind of fires my imagination, I look at the possibilities of now telling it's like I treat it like a short film. So how do I communicate this? How do I entertain, or how do I hook the audience, and how do I land my film? So it's always a very filmmaking approach to advertising, rather than saying on the third shot, this product will come. And I don't even do those kind of ads. I rarely take up a skin commercial or any of those hair commercials. And I'm not because I don't have hair, but generally because of, the format didn't interest me. So whatever allowed me to do some sort of storytelling, some sort of narrative arc, some sort of characters where there's a scope of performances, I think that's something which I was gravitating towards, and I enjoyed myself. And slowly, I think the clients recognized the value I was adding to a basic script. Because there'd be a lot of rewriting scripts. So as and when I got, I think, more prolific, or I got more established in advertising, clients started expecting me to rewrite scripts. They would come with scripts and they would say, "Yaar, kuch kar iske saath aur badal de isko." And then they saw that I was changing a lot of things. I was recasting it. I was redoing the way it was shot. And then they saw the rewards of that going that way, because then the films would do extremely well. They would become very popular. People would write to the client and say, "Look, we want a sequel to this. We want a series out of this." And they would have not seen that kind of response to a commercial. So the next time when they came, and even if I tell them, "Boss, the way you come is correct, I don't need to change anything," they'll feel disappointed. They say, "No, we are paying you so much money now. Please rewrite it for us, or do something different. We don't want what we're expecting. We want." So in between, there was a phase where, I had total freedom. Like I would say, I get more freedom in advertising than I get in feature films, because clients would just blindly trust me. And, sometimes they don't even come on set, no agency on set. I'm only writing, I'm only rewriting. And they would ask, I would promise a film, but my final film would be something different, and they were very happy with it, So I think I kind of earned my space in advertising, where I could do whatever I wanted to make the film better, or the thing land better. And I always push for a very honest approach to selling something. I said, don't come with a hammer and say, buy this, because then you don't need me, for me, it's more persuasive. It's like, you persuade the audience to try this, that's the approach. And it had to be integrated really organically into the main story or narrative. I said, it can't be just a force fit. So I would spend time figuring out how that product could be integrated into the storyline, how it could be made believable. So it didn't seem like a hard sell. It kind of slipped into the film, And for me, then that kept me alive, because I was making short films and somebody was paying me money and to try out different things. And, I had no reason to complain, because there were no restrictions. I was just doing, making ads. And which is why I keep coming back to advertising even after long format, because there is a lot of comfort and there's a lot of freedom I get, and that's something which I cherish.
Yeah. No, like you certainly, like as you mentioned, there is a certain sense of authorship in the way you make an ad commercial. And in that, what tends to happen, like what we hear from most people, is that you get to you get to a point where you're thinking very economically in terms of shots and the way you time it. That okay, each shot has to convey this idea. There's a story thread that you're following. Now, do you find that that aspect of yours limiting you when you're directing long format, that you're accustomed or wired that way? Does that happen at all?
No, so what I do is also I take a long break between advertising and film. So it's not like I shoot an ad and I jump into the film, because I prep a lot. Even on ad films, I spend far more time than normally what filmmakers do. We spend 3 weeks of casting, rewriting, thinking. So that's, I generally take more time for prep. And feature film, it's an approach completely has to different. The approach has to be different. So initially, when I did Hasee, there was a lot of struggle, not just of everything in the film itself, but the whole idea of spending a year or 2 years on one project and shooting for 60 odd days back to back, which is something which I was not used to physically, like you do a 2 days or 3 day or 4 day shoot on an ad, but this is like 60 days at a stretch. And so those things were discomforting. But what also happened is that when we were writing, and I'm always very involved with my writers on the writing of the scripts, you also get a different rhythm. You understand that this is not that 30 seconds or 10 seconds where you have to kind of, but I think it is also an advantage, because sometimes when you're doing humor or certain things, or when you use, because we are learn the economy of storytelling, sometimes how to use, character background action effectively to aid your foreground action, or how to stage a scene from that maximum impact, or if a joke has to land, then what is the timing, which is not just in performance but in edit, what kind of reaction shot is required to which will go with this. I think there are a lot of things we've been doing for years, that it's subconsciously now there is a sense of, if that this way the scene will work better, or this, so I think it was always an advantage for me. And maybe because I spent time writing it, I also understand the rhythm and the whole ins and outs, and where I start a scene, where I get out of it, how the rhythm has to flow, the whole structure of it. I kind of switch off and switch on now. It's a different approach only. So while there are basic techniques of dealing with actors and all those things, I mean, it's the same in advertising or filmmaking. But I think it came to an advantage to because the other thing was, when I was shooting films, and you when you're pushed against a wall and you have it often happens that what you want you never get on a set. There are a lot of these last minute surprises, and actors get stuck, or there's a set problem or whatever. And because you've been doing advertising for so many years, you're quicker on your feet, you can come up with solutions immediately, and that this might work instead of that. And even in my films, I remember a lot of scenes where I've got stuck, and because of that background of shooting so much, you are immediately coming with a solution, and you can figure out, and you kind of go ahead. And not just me, Sujit Sarkar or Ram Madhwani, or I mean, there's so many of us now who are doing features, and I think they've all somewhere benefited a lot with the grounding they got in advertising.
Yeah, that does really I mean, with your films, with like the one things that really stand out even in your ad films are the performances, of course, for sure. I mean, for the longest period of time, I mean, we used to think that Hussain Dalal actually stammers. Like we thought that he's someone who has that problem, but it's no. What I mean to ask, like on a very ideological level, say that at the end of the day, this is supposed to kind of sell a product, and you're telling a story through it. Do you feel that it's important for a filmmaker, just on an audiological level, that to have a say, to have some sort of an artistic integrity while even directing something that's meant for a client, that is kind of like a commissioned work, and but still stay true to themselves and find a voice and not compromise on that, like you said, like 3 weeks of prep you used to put, and finding that freedom that, okay, people will have that faith in you, that they'll give you your 3 weeks, even when someone is starting out pretty early on in their career into advertising. Do you think that's important, to have that integrity, like to feel that, okay, maybe kuch mera bhi kuch hai isme, it's not just something that's being done for the client?
So I think if it helps if you don't see it as contradictory things, if you say that this is what I want to say, this is my story, but this is what client wants, and then I'll always be stuck. I think I've always taken a very flexible and open approach to what client wants, and then it's almost like a patient. Sometimes they say, "Oh, I have a pain here, and I think it's a heart attack," and you might realize it's actually a acidity problem. So you need to understand what he really wants, and not take things at face value literally, and kind of having an inclusive approach has always helped me. So obviously, when you start out, you don't get that kind of freedom opportunity. I think the most important thing is winning trust of a client, where he doesn't feel like, okay, isne mere kandhe pe banduk chala liya, like he just fired from my shoulder, and he basically was going for this film or an award, and by the by, he kind of shafted me. So I've never had that approach. In fact, if client very strongly felt about a certain way he wanted to tell a story, I would dial down what I want and try and accommodate that. And I would say that, okay, let me figure out, do you want this, right? I'll do it for you, but let me find a way where I can do it in my way, and then let's see whether it works. So it's a very collaborative approach I've always had in filmmaking. Secondly, I don't think you win trust very easily. You have to keep working with that person. So the idea in advertising is always to kind of start a relationship with the client, and over time let him trust you. So it's not going to happen on the first job you do or the first instance. It's going to be conversations. It's going to be understanding him. He understands you. But I think what is very important is to have a certain work ethic. Like I think that I always had, where I knew that whatever it is I have to give 100% to the job. I'm very, very hardworking and I'm fully focused on the job. So I never saw advertising as a cash cow, like it's a quick stopgap arrangement before I make my feature film. So this is not what I'm doing. If you have an approach where I say, I'm doing this for the time being, I'm killing time before I can make the film I want. Or this is, I need to employ it, I need to make some quick money. Ad mein kya hai? Wo 30 seconds mein karke nikal jayenge, So if that is the approach, then it kind of clients sense it and they feel that you're not, genuine about it. So for me, it was never that. I really enjoyed the medium. I really enjoyed the craft of it. I enjoyed the learnings of it and the luxuries it afforded me. And I said, okay, I had a very meaningful relationship with the client. And what really helped me in my career was that I've had clients for 8 to 9 years, 10 years, and, we made like 50, 60 films on a brand, because it's come out of a long-term relationship. They realize that I'm actually taking care of what they want. I'm not somebody competing with them or using them. And there was never like a short-term approach to it. I think that's where work ethics, integrity, and all that matters. Finding a voice and the authorship over it, I think that comes organic. I think organically, you cannot force your vision on it. So what I realized is that over time, it's not what I wanted to say. It's how I am saying it is important, and how I am saying it is very individual to the way I look at life. And like when you asked me the first question, did I have it in my film school? No, I didn't have it. It happened even with an advertising about 7 years of directing. I realized this is where I am feeling comfort. I have a certain maybe a humorous way of looking at life, or certain emotion. I look at things very emotionally, or there is a slight kind of irony with which I look at life. So that understanding of yourself and understanding of your craft and marrying that both, I think it takes time. It doesn't come from the word go. Of course, if you're born genius and you're a Chaitanya Tamane, then you're born with it. But unfortunately, I was not any of that. So it took time to figure out life and arrive at a certain kind of a sweet spot for myself, the comfort for myself, where I felt this is how I want to say things. So I might do a political film, I might do a children's film, I might do something else. But the way I see it way I would see life or tell the story will be common in across genres. Sure. So like even Hasee Toh Phasee and Haseen Dillruba, when it came to me, the subject was pulp. The subject was supposed to be very dark, but it had a lot of mean it, because the way there's emotions, there are some kind of moments, there is interpersonal relationships, there is the way jokes are flying, or so a lot of that still came in, because that's how I see life, or that's how I process things, or I want to tell a story. But I've let that happen organically, and I've forced this is the way I see things. And I think even your style or your way of telling keeps changing as you evolve, because we all evolve as human beings, we'll evolve as filmmakers, and it will not be constant. So that will keep changing as we keep working or growing or whatever. So yeah, I mean it's a lifetime process.
Yeah. And even from what we've seen in your work, that idea of irony, or the way of looking at things with a certain quirk, and a certain sense of softness about it. Now, do you think that irony, or this way of looking at things, comes from the fact that you've actually been like you're a Malayali who was brought up in Delhi, so you have kind of like a bird's eye view on your own culture and on the culture around you. So every space that you get into, you kind of tend to see it from all angles and get the irony of it. Do you think that's part of the reason why it happens?
That's amazing insight. Even I never thought of it, but Aryan, it's a perspective I need to now mull over. But yeah, I think I've always been an outsider insider. I've had that because I was a Malayali Christian growing up in Delhi. Yeah. Then when I came to Pune, I was not a Marathi I was an outsider there. And then Bombay again was something which is very alien to me. So I've always, and all my friends are Bengalis. So, so there is always this way of observing certain things. I think it also, I've enjoyed a lot of 80s Malayalam cinema, you know, a lot of those funny Mohanlal, Srinivasan kind of, you know, I've seen that as a kid, and there's a slight influence of that Malayali humor also in my head, which I try and get it in the way I see things. And at times we all lead such a tough life here, because, you know, being a filmmaker coming to Bombay, making something, you know, you can only survive if you have a sense of humor, or you can see it with a certain perspective or a distance. You know, if you get too into it, then you can get depressed and frustrated. And I think I've had friends, and I look forward to company where I can crack a good joke, you know. And as a person, I don't think I take myself very seriously. You know, I think I have the ability to laugh at myself, or at my inabilities, or at my deficiencies, and I'm okay with that, you know. So when I'm not taking myself seriously, or things around it, or there's a certain kind of humor, or and yet I think I'm a very sentimental person, you know. I value a lot of old things, relationships, or moments, or those things. So there is a combination somewhere, you know, and I think that is where I figured that human stories or interpersonal relationships told in a certain, with a lightness of hand, you know, with a slight humor, is where I'm really kind of enjoying myself, you know. And there's a lot of Czech cinema. I don't know, early Czech cinema of, you know, Iri Menzel, if you see Closely Guarded Trains, and I've enjoyed those films as well, you know. And so back of my head, I mean, those influences are there, you know. Even like I said, Ozu, because I know it sounds very weird, like an advertising filmmaker who's selling chocolate is talking about Ozu, but, or somebody's done Haseen Dillruba is talking about Ozu. But, you know, it has influenced me. There's a certain simplicity of telling things, you know. I don't like to I like to take complicated emotions and make it look very simple, make it look very normal, and then layer it to a, you know, in a way where if you catch it, great. If you don't catch it, at least you're entertained, you know. That's my way of sequencing my things. So, and I do kind of dig deep in my own way, not in a academic thing, but, you know, I do think about lensing, I do think about color palettes, I do think about costumes and makeup and light and sound and music, everything. It's not that it's not thought. I might be thinking wrong, or my aesthetic might not be what people might like, but I do think about it. But it flows from a certain way of looking at life, essentially. So yeah.
And it's very also the films that you've made, say The Chosen One, or going to Hasee Toh Phasee, all of these are, you know, if you want to put it down on paper, or kind of explain someone that koi puchta hai ki kya picture kis bare mein hai, kya kahani hai, it's difficult to narrate this. Like, you know, Hasee Toh Phasee, what is the film about? It's really difficult to say. But whenever, like, I have a friend who's in this chat, and she's watching it also, and when you say Hasee Toh Phasee, people always have a smile on their face, and they're like, yeah, it's a very sweet film. It's like, but there's something there. There's something very complex going on there as well. Now, you're starting from The Chosen One. How did that happen? Like, because as you mentioned, there's Shujit Das, there's Ram Madhwani sir, who have a sense of, you know, playing with their own craft when it comes to making ad films, and they're dealing with something else when they're making films. So what was it that you were dealing with at that point of life, or what you were trying to explore when you made The Chosen One?
So I think Chosen One came at a time when I had started doing advertising, and I said, I really also want to tell a long story format. You know, like I said, I let things happen to me rather than me kind of chasing it and being really, like, you know, desperate to do a film. So those days, you know, there was a channel called Star One, and they had a series, like Star Bestsellers. They said, we'll do one long, you know, films with filmmakers and different kind of cinema. So Harshvardhan Kulkarni, who was a 1 year senior to me, and he wrote Hasee, and he did Badai Do, recently directed that as well. And we were very close friends in FTI. And like I said, I got along with this bunch of people who all believed that cinema in different shapes and forms should coexist happily. It should not be like one over the other, but there should be space for all kinds of cinema. So all of us enjoyed all kinds of cinema, and we could debate and discuss each one with relative merits, you know. So so we got along well, and we used to keep discussing stories and ideas and whatever. And then when this opportunity came, and the channel asked me that if you have a story you want to make, I checked with Harsh, and then he had a story about this boy who would keep praying and things would happen. And, you know, the way he prayed. And then, so he becomes this aware of presence of God, and then suddenly falls in love with a girl where he thinks it's a sin. and then things are not happening anymore. So it was a choice between his love and so that. So I thought it was a coming of age, very interesting, sweet story. But we also said, let's explore Bombay or growing up in Borivali. Like he grew up in Borivali, and that you had these priests who had very strong Marathi accents, which when people normally do stereotypical Catholic priests, they speak impeccable English and a very Goan accent. But this is like a Marathi priest, and there is this Mangalorean family living in. So there was like very interesting characters. There's the whole way of living was interesting, and often for us, more than the plot, it's that what we're doing with it. Again, relationships, the way it's set, way people are conversing or dealing with each other, the simple emotions. Those are what was attractive. So we went to the story. They loved the story, and then we started casting, and we did the usual casting, and the channel was liked somebody, and we said, okay, we locked the main kid, and we were about to shoot, and then both me and Harsh were feeling very uncomfortable about it. We said, something is not right. He's too perfect. He's too good an actor. He doesn't feel, there's no emotion. And then finally we went to the tape again. We found this guy who was never acted in his life before. He was just disinterested in the audition. He was like one guy just sitting there. But there was something which was very earnest about him. And we said, yeah, something about him. I don't know if we can act, but both of us felt instinctively that he's correct. So we went to the channel and we said, we want to get this guy. And they said, but this guy he's not interested in himself into what he's doing. He said, no, wait, we'll go and talk to him. So we went and spoke to him. He just wanted to get away from his exams. He didn't want to study. And he was giving his 10th boards, and his parents were like, how can we send this fellow? He's anyway not interested. Now he'll do this. So my Harsh, being an engineer, he said, I'll tutor him in maths for his exams. Let him come and we'll make sure he does well in his exam and stuff, but let him please do this. So we called him, and then with a whole bunch of kids, we went and casted ourselves with outside the casting agent, whatever his thing. We went and recast real people. They would come home, we would sit, we did a workshop for 14 days, discussed, played, had a lot of fun, this thing. And it was all friends. Sanu Varghese, who went on to now he's become a director himself. He's done Aryan in Kerala, which is again last year was So Sanu was starting out. Me, Harsh, Subhash Sahu, of course, is a good sound recordist. I mean, all of us came together. We spent time together as a commune, more like how students make a film. And then with kids, we would spend a lot of time. And we shot the entire film in some 8 days, at a very threadbare budget, and let them improvise and let them have fun. And eventually, when we cut the film, it was 45 minutes, and the channel wanted a 70-minute film. So we had to stretch the shots and use from the flash frame to flash frame to keep the shot. So it's slightly long and boring now, but when the film came out, it got a lot of good response, and people really loved it. In fact, a lot of people even now who keep asking me for a copy, or they check it on YouTube now. But it was really loved, and we won quite a few awards that year. So that was my first journey with filmmaking, and I really had a good time. I said, this is a different way of filmmaking. It's so much more purer. You come in and you're just with the characters and story and no client, whatever. So we really had a good time. But the problem was also that because we worked on a very minimal budget, I couldn't do a lot of things which I wanted to do with the film. The pressure was so much, and you were almost begging and pleading, taking favors, that I said, no, when I do a film, I really want to do it properly, because it's not indicative of my skill set, and I'm compromising so much that I'm not really happy. And I went back to advertising for a long time, and I just wanted to go back and pursue that. So, but that was my film. I think I did that in 2004 or 3 or 4, many years back, and then it took about 10 years before I did my first feature length after that.
No, that was a very interesting film, and we could see shades of that in Harsh's films, in Hunter. The Yusuf's character, or all those guys, I could see that guy. Okay, ye iska bachpan ho sakta hai, iski origin story ho sakti hai ye. Now, what got you back towards making Hasee Toh Phasee? How did you kind of, how did that thing come about?
So, I mean, again, 10 years later, I done again advertising, so many films, and a lot of those films are doing well. I was known in the advertising circles for somebody who was good with human relationships. Yeah. And then I was like, now I want to tell a longer story, and I keep doing this. Nobody even knows about our existence. We are just, making these films doing well. But and then I went to get my phone repaired at Vodafone Center, where that guy refused to give he said, "1 mahina lagega phone theek karne ke liye." I said, but and then it got into an argument where I told him, look, I'm making your films for your company, and that is how you're getting this so many customers, and I was trying to like brag, and he said, "आप जो भी करो, आप मधुर भंडारकर तो नहीं हो ना." So I said, Madhur Bhandakar has so much of respect. He's a filmmaker, and here I'm making ads for him, and all these things. And at the end of the day, I can't even get my phone repaired. And there was this angst finally in me कि film बनाना ही पड़ेगा. But jokes apart, I mean, I wanted to do something long format. I said, okay, let me there was that urge now, and I wanted to do something. And then Harsh and I came with a story which was a very offbeat story, and we went to UTV, and they said, look, nobody's going to make this film. You come with something which we can make easily and cast instantly. Then we said, chalo, let's write a love story, but let's give it our spin, and let's do something differently. And it was called Hasta La Vista at that time, not Hasee Toh Phasee. It was called Hasta La Vista, and then that had a separate journey because we went to Phantom, just started, and we took it to Phantom, and then took a long time to cast for it, and then finally Karan Johar came on board, and then we got it casted with Siddharth and Pariniti, and yeah. So and that's when I learned like a lot of filmmaking is of course give and take, and you have to, because it's your first film, you're also not sure, so people put a lot of pressure कि ऐसा करो वैसा करो, so you're thinking and you're figuring out कि मैं ज़्यादा तो नहीं कर कम नहीं कर, and उससे ऊपर that character, Pariniti's character was a very like a fictional character, there was no reference point to it. She's not a drug addict, she's not somebody with a mental health issue. It was completely fictional, so there was no reference point of how to now treat this character. It was such a complicated thing to play. And we wanted also that to be entertaining. We wanted kids to laugh at the buffoonery she's doing. So, but at the same time, it can't go OTT. So we had so many do's and don'ts with what we wanted to do with her character, and it was a very tough one. But till the edit was done, nobody really knew कि एक film कहाँ जाने वाली है. So eventually, of course, it got made, and over time, we didn't get spectacular box office success at that time. We did really well, but we came in between two big films. There was Gunde and there was Highway and Salman's Jai Ho. So we were sandwiched in between. But what I've seen is over the last 10 years, it's just grown in the kind of love it's getting. Now I feel the people keep referring to the songs, the moments, the things. But it's a sad part when we realize that as a genre, when you do really love stories and you try to do something different with it, people will still dismiss it off with a love story. Isme kya badi baat hai, So the learning was that if you take a issue-based subject, if you take something which is a serious issue or a certain kind of social issue or something like that, and then you make a bad film, it's still fine. Because people decide your greatness with the subject you choose rather than what you do with the subject, So perhaps Hasee is something which warms up a lot of people's lives. And I remember in pandemic, so many people reached out of the blue saying that, we are stuck in the house, but we've been seeing this film on a loop every year. It's just, we get together and we watch the film and we feel good. So it does touch people emotionally, but for that whole, the credit as credibility as a filmmaker comes when you, I think, handle something more obviously respectable.
When you make Chandni Bar. Yeah. Like with Hasee Toh Phasee, like what was that story? What was that offbeat story that you guys had written?
So our take was that initially look, there are a lot of couples, who start dating and they live together or they have a relationship for many years. Yeah. And after a point of time, they're not married, but it becomes a habit. It becomes like your 7 years, you might start dating in college and you go on and into your late 20s and you still date that person and you're not getting married. You don't know. You're getting married only because that's the most logical thing to do. You're not sure whether it's love, whether it's a habit. By that time, the whole romance is fizzled out and just become like a habit. And there was this whole take that for relationships to work, you need to invest in relationships. You need to make sacrifices. You need to adjust. You need to readjust. So it almost sounded like a lot of hard work to make a relationship work. Yeah. So that was a modern take on relationships. So we said, why don't we come back and say, look, it can't be so much of thinking and hard work. It has to happen instinctively and it has to be crazy. It has to be illogical. It has to be, completely from the heart. So that's a stance. We said 7 years, somebody spends time and then in 7 days, this guy falls in love. So that was the original story. And then we also had issues where to cast two heroines was becoming difficult, So then we said, okay, then which is a story we really need to concentrate on, and then we had to cast a bigger heroine. for that. So a lot of those practical things kicked in. But initially, it was a bigger percentage of an existing story of a couple and then somebody falling in love. And the idea was that to not to have heroic people as your lead stars. You had two misfits. There was one, for the first time you're showing a hero who's a loser, who's not reliable at all, who's always messing up. He was constantly here and there underconfident. And playing Siddharth after Student of the Year, alpha hero, making him play this completely guy next door who's kind of a loser, and even the girl who's again playing a double role where she's going cuckoo on one side and then she's completely bichari on the other side. So we knew we had to make an entertaining romantic film, but we said let's give it certain interesting nuances and things. And so I think the scene where she pees in a sari, I think a lot of people have come back and they said, we've never seen a scene like that in a feature film.
Yeah.
So there were those moments, haath upar karo, so a lot of those things we kind of added.
Full se zyada milta hai.
So a lot of that real life learnings and moments were planted into a rom-com kind of framework where the idea was not to shake the genre, but within the genre try and do something little different, little bit more than just pure buffoonery or entertainment or whatever, and have certain emotions. So that was the kind of approach to the film.
Yeah. No, but when you guys were writing it, like it was about this guy who, after spending 7 years with someone, falls in love with someone else in 7 days and realized that this was actually what was meant to be for him. But
Right.
in the film, Meeta's character and these characters, like it was almost, it felt like the way it was structured, because we know we start with a flashback of this guy and this girl and when they were kids, and it almost felt that the screenplay was hinting towards something fated, that okay, this was meant to happen with these guys, and it almost didn't. And so what was how did that aspect come into the screenplay, where it was supposed to be this guy realizing it, and rather it became that okay, these are two people who would go on to meet in life?
I think the idea was always that there was the element of destiny. I think it was subconsciously in us. I don't think it was thought through, but we had this idea of when you click, and you're destined for each other. So that element of destiny did creep in because we thought about these two misfits coming in, and that is why it was earlier titled as Hasta la Vista, which meant also see you again. So it was like, this is not, we're going to meet again, that is what we kept building on. So it was just about when you know that it's a person, it happens instantaneously. It is not about, you don't think through a relationship, you don't have to think about it, you don't have to sacrifice. It just happens instantly. So destiny has a big part of it, and that is why it kind of got hardwired into the way we wrote this film.
Now, visually, what was that something specific that you had kept in mind while that I'm making a rom-com and I have to adhere to certain things when it comes to visuals or the color palettes or whatever? What were the things that you kept in mind just designing the film visually? Because the way you spoke earlier, you had exhausted all those stylistic fantasies that you had. Now coming to this story, which is very organic, characters, real people that we know, and making it making Bombay feel like, okay, this apartment which is full of Gujaratis. Actually, it felt like we've been there. So, what was the approach visually?
I think I let the characters or the scenes dictate what how the story was taken forward. The idea was not, because I knew I had a background in filmmaking, and the first thing people will look for is a lot of style and a lot of that tricks which you picked up. So I said, I don't want to do any of that. In fact, I don't want something to stick out or stand out as great cinematography or lensing or whatever. I said, let's be true to the scene and let's be true to the story and let that dictate itself. Because I was aware of a lot of things. We did we did certain things like how to shoot Pariniti's face. It's a very technical thing,
Yeah.
So I did she had to have this tomboy quality to her and this little crazy, and yet she has to be cute. So we said, okay, let's give her a shirt, and she's always wearing the shirt and jeans and walking around. And then at that time, you also wanted to feel sometimes femininity, sometimes she feels very cute and lovable, and when she's sleeping in the kitchen or when she's looking, how do I work my eyes? So we were aware of those, how to when the impact would be created, what kind of how she would look in certain scenes, and where you felt the impact. So the lighting was very critical because she had deep set eyes. So we said, okay, in this, if you're going to see the eye and if it's going to cast a shadow, then the nose is going to be very big. So because I've done commercials, I know, and I look at faces, and between me and the DOP, we knew that there's a certain way of lighting to kind of make her look a certain way, or Siddharth looks a certain way, whether it's uh, uh, and it was very subtle, just to suit their personalities and characters, not like a lighting scheme where I would go. I did more of that visual planning in my second film, but here it was more just being unobtrusive and being being with the mood of the characters. Of course, we knew it was a rom-com, so we didn't want to go too grungy or too real or something, but it was always balancing certain amount of realism and naturalism with certain kind of hygiene or whatever, like, making it at least look palpable. It wasn't an Anurag Kashyap film, it wasn't a Karan Johar film, it was somewhere in the middle, and we were aware of it. So we said we'll just kind of sweeten the reality a little bit, but not too much and not go too gloss. So it didn't have the scale of a Dharma film, and it didn't have the grunge of a Phantom, but it was somewhere in between. But again, when we were planning, we were not thinking like that. I was more like, this scene requires it to be shot in a certain way, and this is what it's going to feel like, and let's go with with that. So whether it's movement in the camera, so there is a scene in the Gandhi Buleshwar market where they go and she takes a full comedy scene. It was a painful thing to shoot. So where again we had a lot of movement and stuff like that. There's a scene where they both are walking. A lot of the stuff is shot in the car in the night. So it is talking, it is interaction. So there's not much you're going to explore anyway visually. So the idea was just how do I just emotionally or in terms of humor land the scene, and what is required, minimum whatever is required. That is how we just kind of went with the
and like say that song Zehnasib and Ishq Bulawa. Now these songs, of course, they have been completely ruined by reels, if you know this. Lo-fi and reverb, there's this cancer called lo-fi and reverb. But it's now my generation, we were I think in our 9th standard when the film came out, and once we got into like watching other films, watching Almodovar and everything, and this whole idea of new aesthetics that are coming about now, when we see the way it was shot, Ishq Bulawa, that there's certain romanticism to the late night Bombay, and it was done earlier as well with films. So it was very it was not like we could not see us there, and here, like traveling through locals and I mean just being there. No, what was shooting like? What was picturizing that song like? Because you also have lip sync songs and dance numbers, but that is a very, and Zainasib is kind of like the drama is still going on, but Ishq Bulawa is like almost like the story stops here for a moment. And what was that like? What was the whole idea?
You're very right, Aryan, because like a Punjabi wedding song was as a song chahiye. So initially that was also planned like how Zainasib and Ishq Bulawa and Manchala had to be. But those days you had this item or whatever, those kind of big numbers which you needed for every romantic film, and that was a requirement in terms of, and I don't complain about it, I welcomed it, and I said that and that will not reveal much of the story, so we did it like a choreographer coming in. But these 3 songs which are montage in nature, I knew that's my space, and that's how I'm going to show my comfort zone. It wasn't supposed to be like, so people did come back and say, a Punjabi wedding song sticks out like a sore thumb, or that first song which West Side is introduced. So I said, but I mean, now that's the idiom, that is how it operates. So though people love the song as well. So but I think Ishq Bulawa, it was specifically, I always knew I had to do that because it was maybe when we were young and we had Lukha and we were doing nothing in Bombay, and you just spend the whole night whiling away doing nothing, and I've traveled by local trains in the night. We eat at that joint outside the railway station where you have the pav bhurji, and then you get stuck in rains, and there's a lot of fond memories of that time where one was just a bit more carefree, and that whole idea of roaming around the streets without a purpose is itself a fun thing. People don't do it. People are so agenda driven right now, where you plan a date, you go and have dinner, and you do this, and you get off. So I said, when Meeta and Sid's character Nikhil are going through this crazy time, there should be a moment where just themselves, and there is a lot of ease, and it seems like they're just drifting and whiling away their time, but they're having great fun as well. And the whole idea of, again, Hasee is from where, where I is to celebrate the ordinary, some things which you take for granted. How do you see, how do you see it with love, or how do you see it differently, and for me, that exploring that was the fun. So in Zenasi, they're playing, the families playing badminton, they're playing Antakshari, they're doing household things, so the idea was to be very real, very identifiable things, and very ordinary things, nothing very dramatic or out of this world, where it, it should just touch you the way, the simplicity of things, and to explore the city, explore your own house, and those moments. I think that relatability I wanted, it was always there as an approach. So, and the script also has that whole approach of very real things happening around, because your main premise or main plot line is very unreal. A girl taking pills and going crazy. So I said, if that is unreal and the treatment is unreal, then it's a bizarre film. Nobody's going to buy into it. So I knew that after that leeway of allowing Pariniti to play this role, everything else had to kind of feel so real and believable that you bought into that crazy story as well. Otherwise you will never kind of buy into it in the first place. So so it came from there. It came from the fact that let's just celebrate the ordinary and things around us and find love and beauty, and at an unhurried kind of space, So Ishbula was also the night, and they're in the train, they're in the bus, they're here, they're there, just walking in the streets. It's just that, and just moments and scrolling glances. And I miss that, and I feel like Bombay people are not showing Bombay in that level. For that matter, any city, if you've grown up or if you've kind of spent time, just whiling away. And the people did come back and say, we really, Bombay was shot differently, or they saw a different part of it, or that was something which people appreciated. But yeah, I mean, that was always the case.
And you've kind of populated the film with shots that are, like, as you mentioned, the very ordinary things, like the song ends with him picking up a packet of milk and just, and that whole gag of where she's bringing chai ki, oh, and it's like the third and goes chup chap pi le. Now all of those gags and everything, no, one would kind of associate your before Hasee Toh Phasee, the kind of commercials you've made, one would associate that, that exact thing, that precision, and being very economical, almost being like a 90-minute film or something like that. Now, and your screenplay is like that. Your screenplay is like 7 days, and there's a deadline, there's a marriage that's going to happen, but still kind of putting together that pace, where it feels organic. It doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't feel slow. What was that process like? Did you discover most of it on the edit, or like was it that way, like thought out that way exactly?
So one is that Harsh is himself an editor. So when he writes itself, though he writes with a lot more detail than normally writers do. But we had a sense of, in terms of scenes, I don't think anything went out. Everything was there. It was, we did. But the surprising thing is, in both my films, we have literally saved time by cutting frames off. Like the way I do in advertising, it's not that the film allows me extra luxury of more time, more space. Eventually, it's been as precise or as much a struggle as we cut a commercial, where we really fought for that, 2 extra frames, यहाँ से काट दो, यहाँ से 10 frame काट दो, ताकि हम लोग वो 215 के अंदर आ जाए. We are in the 2 hour 15 bracket. We don't want it to go longer. So we have struggled with that in the edit as well. It's always your first cut is about half an hour more than what you anticipate. And with humor, sometimes you need to keep cutting it further, because like Hasee has huge gags. The one is that where the chori wala gag, where Sadat Saxena's scene. I mean, there's characters and yeah. And then that can be cut in 1,000 ways. So you keep coming back and you say, how do I cut it? How do I make it effective? How does that whole that joy of that scene landing, eventually he becomes the popat on, he's the one who eventually becomes a fool. So how do you graph it, and how do you land it with that satisfaction or that satiation of that scene completing itself? So one of the things in Hasee which I learned, and I didn't want to do it in Haseen Dillruba, was have scenes with a lot of characters, because it's painful shooting. It is painful because you have 10 characters, and especially a comedy scene, because it's all about reaction.
Yeah.
So, your joke, you'd say it twice, you get bored with it. So you spending a whole day where somebody is doing something funny and then shooting reaction shots in every angle, waiting to see ab edit mein kaun sa kya baithega malum nahi hai, but ye aisa aana chahiye. It is really time consuming. And Hasee Toh Phasee had only so many scenes which are like 8 characters, 11 characters. through the scenes, and those were really tough because even Parinithi's entry into the first day when she comes in the family and she walks into the door. So there's a certain rhythm I wanted, certain reactions everybody would give. Then she sits on the table, then the mother starts reacting, then the cousins come in and they're looking at Siddharth's character. So you're going into different spaces with reaction shots and looks and how to weave it together. So it was a very cumbersome shoot when you shoot these, like we say, dining table sequences, which are painful. And then most directors would say that, especially comedy scenes in dining tables is I've faced that in Cadbury commercials and I've faced it in this film. So in Haseen, I made sure I'm not having too many characters sit around because I said it's going to be a painful process trying to get everybody's reaction and getting the same level of it is a struggle.
So did you shoot most of it like coverage style, or like was it like do you storyboard and it was broken down already?
I think storyboarding for a film is not feasible. I mean, if you're not doing action or a VFX, I don't mean for emotions and acting, it really works. So films, I don't storyboard, but I do take a lot of takes, and I do also a lot of coverage, which is both, I'm infamous for, and actors, a lot of actors struggle with it and technicians complain with it. But I honestly don't know why people because filmmaking is also a technical craft. It's a scientific craft, and while actors can perform, eventually a film is going to be made on the edit table. So I am from that school of thought where yes, what happens on the set is important, the performances are important, but what eventually is going to matter is the edit. So I'll extend my answer over and above what you asked me. Is that yes, I take a lot of takes because the way I like to take performances out. Because what happens with actors, a lot of them is that the first two takes are something which comes from their muscle memory of how they perceive life or how they perceive a situation, and over years they figured out this kind of smile works for me, or this way I look, or if I hold a tear like this, or if I turn this way, they know what works for them, and they give you what they've done for all their work. And then there might be certain things which I have in my imagination which is also coming from my muscle memory of how I imagined a scene or whatever. So it's only when you nudge and you push and you scratch around and you kind of stretch it a bit, you realize that there might be something which is something which I've not thought of, or he is not thought of, or she is not thought of, and there is another movement which comes out of that, and which is really priceless. And so I'm always so I tell my actors, like, ideally I know what I don't want, but I don't know what I want. And if you give me what I want, I'm very bored. So don't give me that. Let's look for. So of course, I look at actors' comfort. Like I look at like if, for instance, Tapsi, somebody doesn't like to give too many takes. She's very instinctive. She said after 2-3 takes, I become mechanical, and I understand and I respect that about an actor, and fair enough. But there are actors who, for instance, when you work with Vidya Balan or Vikrant Massey, who like to experiment, to keep searching. Iska kuch aur ho sakta hai. Can I not give an expression for this thing? Will it be more impactful? Will it be better this way? So there is a constant search, if possible, to try and find an interesting way of rendering a performance, and that's why I do try and take a lot more options of performances and whatever. And actors do get disoriented because they have a graph in their head, and they are come with this thought कि मैं इसको मैं ऐसे play करूंगा. But then when you say कि थोड़ा ज़्यादा करो, थोड़ा कम करो, या ऐसे करो, वैसे करो, it messes up with their graph. They're saying, yeah, but why is he trying different things? Yeah. But you don't understand that when you bracket it, when you start editing it, you might get a graph which is very different from what the actor thought, which is fine, because for the film, the graph which comes on the edit is much more nicer or might be more interesting. And a lot of times you might shoot something from the back, and not seeing that expression is far more impactful in the edit because of the context of it than actually an actor giving expression. So an actor might feel मैंने कुछ किया ही नहीं इसमें, तो इसमें क्या मतलब है? But that absence of it makes better sense in the edit. So I do like to do coverage, and I like to, factor permitting, I also take a lot of takes to figure out is there anything which we can try or do differently. And so it is a bit, I have a very difficult, laborious approach to making films, but I think often it has also helped me come with really good performances from actors which they've not been able to recreate otherwise anywhere, because it's come from this process.
So from Hasee Toh Phasee to Haseen Dillruba, what was we've seen you take long gaps between films. Now, of course, we were seeing you make ad films and everything, but what got you back to making a film like was it the world, the pulp, the whole pulp world that the story was situated in, or was it the characters, or was it the genre altogether? What was it that brought you to this film?
So yeah, after Hasee, again, I went back to advertising. Like I said, I was extremely comfortable with advertising and I really enjoyed it. And that apart, I was working on a couple of scripts which never materialized into a film for various reasons, for character, for casting or for producers or whatever. It did not happen. And then Haseen Dillruba, which again was called Heer earlier, Kanika, who I had met initially for Manmarzia many years before Anurag and all did it. I mean, I knew of her and then I met her socially at some dinner and I just casually asked her, is there something which is there which I can make quickly because I really want to make a film and none of my projects are taking off. So she said, let me get back to you. And then a week later, she came back to my office and she narrated the script of Heer. And she said it's that, it's a world of pulp, those cheap paperback Manohar Kania type of books you get on railway stations, and you read, and it has to be like a cheap pulpy thriller. And she said, "This is the world I want to be." And then the narration was very funny. There was a lot of humor in it, and I said, "This is something which I have not done before, and it kind of feels new to do because also I did not want to repeat myself from Hasee Toh Phasee and do a same kind of rom-com kind of film." And but I had certain things I felt were inconsistent, and I said, okay, let's if you're okay with these changes, then let's work on it. And then she said, yeah, we can figure this out. And then we did spend time writing it. But I think I thought the world was very interesting of Hindi film pulp, and having grown up in North India, I was aware of certain kind of these books and the cheap thriller this thing. So that was interesting. And then secondly, I thought that I could play with different genres in the film. So there's a rom-com element, there is a whodunit, there's a police procedural, there is a revenge story. Yeah. So there's multiple genres, and I said, why does one have to be specific about slot one film in one genre? If you can get in and out of different genres and keep it fluid, I thought that's a good experiment to do. And I like the fact that both the characters start at a point and through the film they transform into a completely opposite by the end of it. So somebody as submissive as Vikrant eventually becomes like this psycho guy at the end, and Apsi being this very alpha, whatever, like a very strong woman, actually becomes very demure and submissive towards the end. I said that travel of characters is something which I also want to see. So it was a very unrealistic graph in that sense because they were actually changed 360 degrees by the end of the film. So it was a challenge how to now work this graph as smoothly as possible without too many bumps along the way. Plus, then you're also telling the love story should land with certain kind of emotion, and your thriller also has to be, like you need to be like hooked to the end. So there was a lot of these different things which I needed to merge, and I thought that challenge was itself, I think, got me hooked. Also, I did not want to shoot it like a obvious pulp thriller. Like I didn't want to give it a stylistic element, it wasn't a very Hollywood approach to it. Like I didn't want to go Tarantino on it. I said I wanted to flow like a normal film, and suddenly when the dark bits or when the thriller bits hit you, they hit you much harder because you're not expecting it. So a lot of people, when they saw the first half of Haseen Dillruba, they thought, oh, it's like Hasee Toh Phasee in a small town. It was like a rom-com. And then when that whole thing starts shifting, then that shock value of the impact is much more. So I said, let the film flow like that, and let it flow from one genre to another genre. And visually also, then we thought of certain kind of milestones or certain kind of way where the film will progress in terms of colors, in terms of lensing, in terms of all those things. So I think all that I think on a craft level was very exciting for me.
Yeah, and that scene, like the first time it got I noticed it as a there's a shift in the aesthetics of the film was on the terrace wala scene where she comes in and he's almost like that. That's almost like that's a very David Fincher-esque scene. Grab them by the balls, kuch bhi ho sakta hai, and this guy's really twisted in his head. Now, when you talk about these characters who have these arcs, like I'm pretty sure you like one of the general criticisms that the film received was with Harshvardhan Harshvardhan's character, Harshvardhan Rani's character. He was almost he was almost appropriated to be that guy, is what I felt. and we don't know what his what he's driven by. Do you agree with that?
So, a lot of it, I mean, I would agree a part of it, because also I think there were far more scenes which we had to, for length and for various reasons, I
It
had
felt like that. It actually felt
I
like
had
that.
to take out. And I think on hindsight, it might have felt jumpy for people because he just came in, and then he kind of went out. But, um, there were a lot of things happening in the film, and I had to then make a judicious choice of what really is, what I could take out and still kind of survive. So with Harsh's thing, I think he became too much of a black and white, and then
Yeah.
it felt a little bumpy there, because there was a scene where they fall in love, and we took it out because I think it was my feeling or whatever, that scene wasn't really firing for me, and I said having it here is causing me more harm than taking it out. So I realized that, for an average audience, when the flow is happening, they might feel the bump, but they'll just move on, rather than have something really bad out there and make it stick out. So वो नहीं था वहाँ पर, and I think that was one of the reasons where he felt a thing. But he was also meant to be a catalyst rather than
Yeah.
a big, like, it wasn't a triangular story in that sense, because he's just a catalyst for them to kind of go to a different path. So he never had that kind of presence in any way. And unfortunately, Harsh's casting got done while I was shooting the film, because we did not find anybody for that character. So even with Harsh, I was not able to spend that time and prepare him. Poor guy had to land on the set and we were just shooting. But I mean, of course, those are just incidental details. But I think, yeah, maybe a scene or two which I took off, if I had got it back, perhaps would have sorted some of those issues. But there's a lot going on here. It's very steep. Like I said, these are very steep graphs, and I needed to go. I could not stretch. Like, there's one love story which has happened with Vikrant and Tapsi's character, and then another story to get into and invest time in it felt too long, because then people are also waiting for that thriller. Hua kya, and you don't want to delay it if it's not. So in the edit, we felt maybe that's something which needs to be shortened, and then get on with the story, get on with the second half, where you want to know how and what this woman has done. And it wasn't a pure thriller also. Like, we never intended it to be a full-on thriller, because the plot doesn't have enough material to operate as a pure thriller. It was a relationship film which had thrilling elements. So
in a very match point Woody Allen kind of a way.
Yeah, because we are not trying to hide. You would guess that, look, she's not committed the murder and we are planting that in the beginning. We are showing her with that, throwing those pieces of mutton to the dog, and that something is amiss. There's a look she looks when she looks at the cut hand. We're showing that, so that she is not. So we are not saying, hey, this was meant to be a surprise. It was like, yes, it's a means to kind of telling a relationship story, and it had a bookending in terms of a thriller. So that was the approach to it. So more than who done it, it was how done it. Kind of, you guess that, look, something is happening here, but how did this happen is what we wanted people to wait for. But if I cut the love story between Vikrant and Tapsi shorter, then whatever he's doing seems very illogical, because he's like, this guy did not love her. Why is he going and willing to kill himself? So you needed to invest something in the love story. You needed to have a catalyst, and then you need to get to so that 2 hours that jostling for all those things was there. So yeah, in the middle, I do agree that on hindsight, those scenes had to work better for me to put it back, and maybe it would have been longer, but probably more smoother.
Now, so there's this story. There's a short story, Roald Dahl's short story, "Lamb to the Slaughter." Was that an influence for that how done it thing? Because it was very similar.
No. In fact, I'll tell you what happened is that when the first time Kanika narrated to the story, and she said, "Look, this is going to be." Like, first thing I asked her, this is the same Roald Dahl story where, so the cops eat the proof. I don't believe it. The opening scene was that. We took it out because I wasn't happy with the scene. The opening scene of the film was the cops are eating the mutton, and you think that she's the killer in this, because we wanted to say, look, if you're thinking this is it, then we're getting out of the way. But we did not use that because the scene really wasn't, moving the story forward, and I wasn't happy with this way the scene came about. So I mean, I think the film is way much more than.
Of course.
And there the husband is killed, and that thing is fed to the cops. Here it's just incidental that she gives it to the dogs, but it's more also about how the thing happened, and hence his chopping off his hand was a bigger, what do you call, for me, the bigger thing than how this was fed out, how the proof was,
Yeah.
So we knew about it, but I don't think that was, and I felt the film and the story was way beyond all that, even if it ever was, which I'm sure was not inspired, because it's such a commonly known story that we would be stupid to do something based on that.
Yeah. So now post Haseen Dillruba, now what is it that is like you are dealing with creatively, like as a filmmaker? What is the story that you are looking for, or kind of sinking your teeth into?
So right now I'm just I've gone back to advertising, and I've been
Yeah.
busy with that, and there is
Yeah.
a lot of that stuff happening. So I'm enjoying myself. It's a little break and comfort I get. I'm reading a lot of stories. Uh, there's a story which is Harsh has again written, and we had wanted to do it long time back. It's again a relationship comedy, and so that is there for sure, and we want to revisit that. But that apart, I'm reading, and I might want to do an action film or something very different from what people expect me, like a repeat of what I've done. So I I kept myself open here. I mean, anything which kind of excites me, I would like to pursue with that. But in the meantime, till that happens, I'm happily doing what my first love is, which is advertising. And
Yeah.
in fact, I've worked with all the actors I could not use in my feature film, but in the last 6 months,
You shot
from
with Shah Rukh
from
Khan.
Taro to Ranveer to Alia to everybody. So it's just been a good, fun ride.
Yeah, that's lovely. Now, and you've been like that as a director, right? Like, being very adaptive and kind of looking for stimulus that, कि, okay, this is what exciting me. Instead of just going out, "अच्छा, अभी मुझे ये picture बनानी है, अभी मुझे ये picture बनानी है." Instead of that, you just let it come to you.
Right.
Now, yeah. So so with this we come to the end of my conversation with you now. I'm sure Naveen Shashi, who is in our chat right now, has a question that he wants to ask you. He asks that, hi sir, how do independent filmmakers approach OTT platforms, because today there's a lot of fake distribution systems also there. What is Netflix's, like, how, like, basically how do we get our, it's also my question. I mean, it's his question. Also my question. How do we get our smaller films to be seen on platforms, bigger platforms? Is what he's asking.
I think if the film has already been made, then yeah, I mean, you will have to approach Netflix, and they have a acquisition team, and then they see films and review it. And so I think whether it's Netflix or Amazon, they have that department which look at the films. Uh, so that is the process. It's a tough one because they do see a lot of things and they reject uh, many films as well. Something as good as E Balayu, which is made by a friend of mine, did also struggle so much to be eventually sold to OTT. So something which is not backed by a big producer, or something which is not done very well in film festivals or commercially well, it is a difficult process to go and get an OTT to kind of do it. So it's a conventional route. You have to approach them, you have to meet the acquisition team and request them, and then if they like the film, then they pick it up. So yeah, I mean, that's the usual process.
Yeah.
Or you have to get a good producer who buys into it, and then he takes it to so if there is a good production house or a studio which which kind of likes your film and then says, okay, look, uh, we can, they probably are much better at then kind of selling it on OTT or showing it there than you as an individual going there without any backing. So I would normally recommend, if it's possible, to get a bigger production house or a studio to kind of buy or watch the film, if it's not possible to individually go and approach the networks.
Hmm.
And sir, how was it to direct Anurag sir and SRK together, like in ad?
So Anurag is somebody who I have I'm known for since FTI days, last 20 years. He wrote the dialogues for Hasee Toh Phasee as well, and I share a close bond with him. Like all my films, the first person to see is always Anurag. So he's somebody who's like a close friend, and I know him quite well. And in fact, I only casted him in the ad because I felt that with Shah Rukh, you need an opponent, or you need somebody who's also equally interesting or equally, strong. And it was a good move because Anurag and Shah Rukh were good friends, or they knew each other. So on set, it was good fun because they were talking and chatting and easing each other, and because there was a good camaraderie between them. A lot of the hard, heavy lifting, which I would have to do as a director and go and, like with actors and especially with stars, you need to go and socialize, you need to chat with them and get out performances and put them at ease. And, all that Anurag was doing it effortlessly from my side. So I just had to kind of, go ahead and take the shots. And with Shah Rukh and all, they're such accomplished actors. You can't go and direct them. You can't tell them aisa chahiye, waisa chahiye, because they know what you want. And then it's just a matter of, sir, thoda kam karo, thoda zyada karo, and that's all. So you can't specifically go and tell them, mujhe ye chahiye, look, they're too far too senior and far too good to be directed. And generally, my philosophy in life is, they used to say that don't spoil a good film by directing it. So if you can avoid directing actors and giving too much instructions, and if the actors are doing a great job, then don't interfere, let it be. So that was my policy here. Both Anurag and Shah Rukh are very intelligent actors, and Gopal was there, and they're all sorted out. So very basic directions, and they were just, the idea was that they should have that comfort where they can start improvising and do a lot of fun things, because that is what you need in that film. You need a lot of, fun chemistry, and that just comes out of a very easy environment on set. And for me, that was what I was aiming towards, rather than giving them directions ki ye expression ya wo expression chahiye.
और SRK Plus का आइडिया किसका था? वो आपका ही था?
नहीं, वो तो there was Hotstar की internal advertising team, creative team hai, and they are also at an agency. Of course, one sits with the agencies and we rewrite a lot of things. We work out the jokes again before I go to a shoot. Like I had done earlier, I told you earlier also that there's a process of writing, and we rewrite a lot of things to make it fit in that 30 seconds or 60 seconds and make it effective. And then, so before the set, we did all that. I mean, we sorted that out, and and then eventually the actors, of course, bring their flavor to it.
अच्छा सर, मेरे एक फ्रेंड का क्वेश्चन है कि एडवाइस फॉर अ डायरेक्टर कमिंग आउट ऑफ फिल्म स्कूल.
Yeah, what would you say to someone who's fresh out of college?
See, it depends, because there is no perfect way. I mean, to each to themselves, because there are a lot of friends of mine who do not want to assist anybody. They say, we don't want to assist, we want to make a film, and we learn that way. So we'll take the harder route of doing short films and then independent films and then growing like that. And it's worked very well, and it's not worked for some people. They will not manage to do anything. And there are people like me who said, we need to learn more, because of course we learned something in film school, but I want to assist in being in the industry. I want to learn some skill sets. I want to, and a lot of directing is basically people, it's just dealing with people. It's people management skills. It's not as creative as much as dealing with situations and people on set in that particular time. So I felt that I need a lot of real life on-set experience before I wanted to direct myself. So I went the assisting kind of route, and that kind of worked for me to an extent. So depending on what your friend wants and how she wants to go about it, she can take either of those routes. I feel assisting a filmmaker you really like or you really admire helps, because there's a lot of academic learning in film schools, and it's still a protected environment. You don't really face a lot of the real world problems and situations. So it's good to kind of have a bit of a assisting experience, observing things, learning how it is on set before you actually go out and direct. It just kind of makes you a bit more I guess rooted to reality. So my advice is that, but each to himself. Whatever works, wherever you see an opportunity, grab it, and whatever makes you happier.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
So with this, we come to the end of today's session. Thank you so much for joining us. So thank you so much for talking to us. It was really insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aryan. I hope it was of any use. Yeah.
It is. It surely is.
Okay. Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.